Hi, I'm Laura Richards with the Spark Business Institute, and I'm here today with.
Patrick Lee, also of the Spark Business Institute.
Um, so, Patrick, tell us about your role with the Spark Business Institute and what you do and how you envisioned it.
Spark has been a long time dream of mine, entrepreneurial dream of mine, because I felt that there had to be a way to um, get to local businesses, small businesses, and bring them the same sort of breadth of professional assistance that the big companies have. You know, big companies can go to a McKinsey or Deloitte or somebody, get whatever expertise they need, but that sort of cost paradigm is way beyond small local business. And also, there's too many small local businesses to be able to tap into that. So my thing was, can we bring together some sort of scalable online platform that provides these local businesses, these small businesses, with good, solid professional assistance?
So, on that note, I'm going to tell our listeners about the mission and vision of Spark. I've joined Spark 3 years ago as the COO, trying to operationally assist in getting the platform off the ground. And in so doing, we've worked on a lot of different client work and in the community a lot. So, for our listeners out there, the vision of the Spark Business Institute is to drive Main Street businesses to the forefront of the American economy. We continually create, innovate, and provide incomparable tools to give business owners a disruptive approach in their search for professional help. We will honor and respect each entrepreneur's vision. And our mission, as passionate advocates of small business, we help entrepreneurs uncover their true personal and business potential, overcome the great small business plateau, and realize their greatest ambitions. And why I wanted to go back and revisit this today, Patrick, is I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there during this, global pandemic and certainly crisis here domestically, that are scratching their heads and going, I was on a path maybe to achieving my vision with a lot of obstacles. As small business owners ourselves, we know about those obstacles. So it becomes particularly poignant and relevant right now about how many struggles face small businesses and particularly right now. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I was reading an article about the reopening of the European markets right now, and how it's been fits and starts and coughs and sputters. And when I was reading about the small business retailers, it's pretty dire. Um, they're opening back up multiple businesses, but they're doing it with extreme restrictions, right? So they're letting them open 2 days a week, only 5 people in a store. There's no commerce there. The reopening is more of a lifestyle, or an acknowledgement that life goes on. But even the store owners are saying this isn't about making any money or getting back into an economic groove. That's not happening. There's no way it can under these restrictions. This is more about trying to bring life back into the store, give our customers the ability to get out and maybe buy a book, or something like that. And the owners are pretty worried because they know that the supply chain to the consumer has already been disrupted, and the consumer is finding ways around it. So they're going to have to win back in some way all their customers. There'll be some loyal customers. There'll be some who want to go put their hands on a book, but all the customers who are so used to getting whatever they needed by simply going to their favorite stores have found ways to get it. And there's a few exceptions. There's a few industries and stores, I'm sure, that are providing something that has not been easy to find or get around. But for the most part, they're starting from scratch, and they're not even starting from scratch jumping into the pool. They're being told, okay, put your foot in, see how the temp is, now get your foot back out, and let's test the water again, right? So this is going to have some pretty massive impacts on folks who have tried to keep their businesses open, their small businesses open, who have tried to keep this attitude that we're going to come out of this and they're going to restart. I think when we look at natural disasters, around the world, and you look at how it affected the economies there, there's a huge percentage of businesses that never come back. So this is going to be a very interesting economic restart for Main Street business.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think we're already starting to see some pretty profound effects of that. What are advocates of Main Street to do in a time and in this time? How do we affect change? How do we get the information out there to small businesses of what we should be doing? And how do we prepare ourselves better for future?
I think the first thing is to get out some sort of consistent message. I think in times like this, there's sort of two camps of how people behave. I think one is that you just stand in the storm and you watch everything fly by, right? There goes a car, there goes a cow, oh, well, there's a cat, and you're just doing this. And then there's folks who are like, okay, there's a storm going on out there. The storm will end, and we need to focus on what it will look like when the storm ends. And I think small business sits in a weird place and has always sat in a weird place because it's a conglomeration of multiple individuals. When you look at, the Fortune 500, there are 500 companies, each with leaders. You could put them in a ballroom and they could have a conversation. We've all been to a conference where that conference has a conversation and people understand what's happening. You can't take small business owners and put them in a room and have a conversation. So there has to be a conversation, and there has to be a critical mass that generates from this. And I think that the very first thing is to start having conversations that aren't reactionary. Like right now, all my conversations with clients are about the different stimulus packages and who's applied for what and what are you hearing and what can we do and which states are reopening and is it too soon, and we're just being led along this conversational path by the news media, by politicians, by whatever's happening. It's reactionary. We will not effectively determine our own fate if that's how we're going to behave. So I think what we have to do is we have to say, okay, we are in this. We don't have control of it, but we need to influence it. And we don't need to influence it in the moment as much as we need to influence how we emerge from this and make sure that the structural inadequacies of our current system as they affect the small business economic reality aren't the same when we reopen, or we have a plan as to how to move forward and do that. And I think that's one of the things that I always envision Spark being, is a platform to have these conversations, as a movement where we are total mainstream advocates. And how do we connect businesses, buy local movements, and start having these conversations in order to affect real systemic change?
Well, I think one of the things that you pointed out when we were talking about this was when, and actually people have asked me when we talked about the money for the PPP, and we find out that, multi-million-dollar restaurant chains or billion-dollar restaurant chains, qualified for tens of millions, hundreds of millions of PPP money.
Yeah.
And people said, well, how did that happen? And I said, well, the small business owner doesn't have an attorney on retainer that they call, and they get the down low for what they need to do to apply for this stuff. And, they're slower to get information. And there's just so many, there's so many vehicles that are at the fingertips of big business that aren't at the fingertips of small business.
I think I had an analogy that came into my mind the other day, and it's practicing medicine for agriculture. And I look at corporations, big business, they're thoroughbred racehorses. When one of them gets sick, right, a specialist comes in and treats that one, tries to figure out what's going on with it, and it gets whatever it needs. Small businesses are like a flock of chickens, right? So when we're practicing chicken medicine, we don't care that that chicken's sick or that chicken's sick. We just grab those two chickens, chop their heads off, get what blood we need, do a little diagnostic on them for the good of the flock. The two chickens, they didn't matter. And that's how small business is approached. We're just a indicator for the big macro economy and for the investor class and for the politicians and for the corporations. They need us, but they don't need us individualized at all. And they don't need us having the temperament of a racehorse. They need us having the temperament of a chicken.
Yeah, that that creates a good visual for why banding together is so important. If only all those chickens could rise up.
That's right. Rise up, chickens. So
Um,
I think one of the things that one of the reasons why we end up in this sort of place where we go along to get along is, I think the small business owner, just by the nature of how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur and start a small business and make it all work, you get focused in on what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And there's a whole lot of people out there who say, hey, you need to be able to focus on your business as much as you're focusing in your business. And so there's an effort made by many entrepreneurs to go, okay, let me take a step back and look at the big picture of my business. But that's also missing another component, because the big picture of your business relates to a lot of other things. So stepping back and seeing the forest for the trees is great. But you also, at some point, you take even a step further and see where that forest is in location to other forests and other places. So that part almost never happens. And I think there's a few organizations that were created to try to sort of do that. I think local chambers of commerce were one, but they rapidly sort of caved into our own demands, which was, we need you there simply to create more business for us, not necessarily to look at the entirety of the picture. Now, some chambers do. Some chambers are advocacy chambers, and they're working on different pieces. But I'm not sure that we figured out how to unify our voice in a way that gets heard where it needs to get heard. I just don't think that's happened yet. And I think that's one of the main functions that need to occur right now. While we're all sitting here communicating like this, doing our Zoom meetings, we need to figure out how we have the conversations, because right now we have time to have those conversations. And right now it's almost more important. So instead of hunkering down in your house, terrified of what's coming, these conversations should be happening quickly. I mean, I look at how much social media and our communication tools have allowed massive things to happen in other countries, where revolutions and entire culture changes are occurring because people were able to communicate. That exact tool is what we have right now, with all the time to do it. So these conversations need to start happening.
I agree. So let's talk for a second. We were talking about local chambers of commerce, and I think as entrepreneurs are always looking for ways to network with one another and connect, and so a lot of times we see that the emphasis is put on their educational programs, but they're the kinds of educational programs that you see over and over again, like how to market your business online, how to set up a LinkedIn profile, those kinds of things. So if you were going to see the education of small businesses right now around what we can do to change the bigger scope, what would that look like?
Well, I think there's two things that come to mind. The first is that your local chamber is doing what it knows how to do, and is also doing what creates attendance at its events. It's trying very hard to be relevant. So it's up to you as the business owner to go in there and say, here's what would be relevant. Here's some conversation we need to have. Now, right now, I know for certain that if you were to call up your local head of your local chamber and say, I want to do a Zoom business owner to business owner conversation on buy local and Main Street economics, and I'll lead it, that they're not going to say, huh, no, don't do it. They're going to go, oh, happy to. What were you thinking? How would you like to do this? So if we take the initiative to start the conversations, and maybe when you first start it, there'll only be 3 people in the room, right? Or in the Zoom room. But just starting the conversation, let it go where it needs to go, be robust with it, and then keep doing it. You will get more people involved, and people will start to realize this is conversations that do matter. I also think the other piece here is, I think there needs to be a true belief by local movements that this isn't just trying to squeeze a couple of sales here and there away from Amazon, right? This isn't just, hey, we say buy local and put up a sticker because we're desperate and we don't have any real thing other than, hey, please buy local. Well, there's a whole lot of reasons why competition against the big boys is possible, especially in localized economies, and how that functionally works. It's a whole nother topic, but it's very, very doable. And I think we have to overcome our complacency to think, well, this is just the way it is, and therefore this is what we do. And I'm just happy that, I'm able to succeed as much as I can. This model that we sit in right now is not the only model. And in fact, it's not the best model for us. So why we accept it is a whole another question. The other thing that you can do at the chamber level is begin to talk across aisles. Here's where small businesses sit, because I don't like to deal with politics. I truly don't. But you have to at least acknowledge where you sit in regards to politics, because they influence everything. We're seeing that right now with the stimulus packages and how we're reacting to the pandemic, both from a health perspective and from an economic perspective. But small business owners tend to do the same thing we all do. They align themselves with one political affiliation or another, right? You're aligned with the right or the left, Republicans or Democrats, right? Far left, far right. You end up aligned somewhere in how it's defined right now. But if you step back and look at small businesses, they don't fit either constituency exactly. They sit in the middle, and they get divided between those constituencies, so they have little impact. So if we were to sort of try to define the constituencies a little bit, you'd say that, one political party is looking at the economy as it is, a corporate capitalist economy, and the goal is to employ as many people as possible at the lowest possible living standard and make an investor class very wealthy, right? You go over to the other side and you look at it, and they're not disputing the investor class or any of that. They're just saying that we need some safety nets, and we also need to acknowledge that government is one of those big businesses, and it should be supported just as much as the corporation is supported. And our goal is to keep the people that are working in this model as healthy and comfortable as possible, because they're very essential cogs in this process. The small business is not a large business. So when we ally ourselves with sort of the business side, we're thinking that policies that are good for business, meaning Amazon or Costco or McDonald's, are also good for us. That's not true. We are not the same kind of business, and the policies actually do not benefit us. And if you try to say to yourself, well, I'm a working person in the economy, and I want certain minimum wage requirements, I want certain healthcare requirements, I want certain things like that because I'm an employee. You're not an employee. And if you're a business owner, you know how those policies impact your ability to actually work within your business. It puts a huge burden on you to accomplish things that benefit others, not yourself, right? And if small business was left up to its own devices, it historically takes better care of its employees and has a more positive impact on its communities than either of those two other things. So it sits in the middle, and we end up getting pulled apart because one person allies with this political party, one person allies with this political party, none of it for the actual interest of the small business conglomerate.
That makes sense. That
That
makes
was
a lot
that
of
was very wordy, but I thought I was getting somewhere with it.
I think I know where you're trying to go with that. So I think we have another conversation for another podcast. We're right at about 30 minutes here, so I'm gonna wrap us up today. What would you like to wrap out that conversation by saying? If you had to sum up what
Actually,
we talked about in a nutshell, what would it be?
um, I think I'm going to read something from an economist, because when I was looking at this, one of the first things that came to mind is it's hard for people to believe that there can be something different, and when they look at it, they're like, well, what would that even look like? So I sort of wanted to get sort of a definition of localized, and overcome a couple of hurdles to the concept. So this reading is from Helena Norberg Hodge, who was a previous director of the International Society for Ecology and Culture and Economics. And she writes, moving towards the local may seem impractical or utopian. One reason is the belief that an emphasis on the local economy means total self-reliance on a sort of village level, without any trade at all. The most urgent issue today, however, isn't whether people have oranges in cold climates, but whether their wheat, eggs, or milk should travel thousands of miles when they can all be produced within a 50-mile radius. Individuals are becoming dependent for their everyday needs on products that have been transported thousands of miles, often unnecessarily. The goal of localization would not be to eliminate all trade, but to reduce unnecessary transport while encouraging changes that would strengthen and diversify economies at both the community and national levels. The degree of diversification, the goods produced, and the amount of trade would naturally vary from region to region. So, the idea that buying from Amazon is just a convenience thing, and us as local retailers or local stores are there just to provide some sort of almost entertainment while you shop, that's actually not accurate. There is more to the buy local movement, and we can't imagine a different system that emphasizes localized Main Street economies.
And that's exactly what we need to do.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Patrick. This has been enlightening. I'm ready to go out there and have a great day helping my small business clients.
Thank you, Laura.
I'm Laura Richards with Spark Business Institute.
And I'm Patrick Lee. See you next time.